Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here, and once more we find ourselves reviewing Rings of Power. This is episode 6, and so episode 5 was the best episode so far. Not necessarily because it was good, but it was the least offensive to the canon and the lore of Tolkien. Therefore, that kind of made it the best episode. So, I wasn't sure what expectations to go in with this episode, because episode 4 was easily the worst. So, let's just jump right in, shall we? So the episode opens with Arndir running through a forest and doing, elf ninja stuff against some orcs. So, I kind of forgot, what Arndir was doing the last episode he was in. I remember there was, the whole thing with, the Ents and Isildur. And I forget, I don't remember Arndir saying he was going any place or anything like that, and I didn't really bother to, go back and rewatch the scenes or anything like that, because I can't be bothered to rewatch anything with this show. So, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Arndir is one of the few characters that I kind of have any sort of attachment to. And then he just, after he dispatches those orcs, I don't know why he decides to inspect the orcs. Maybe it's just that I missed him, seeing the map first, or if he was randomly oh, hey, I'm going to loot this orc. And just so happens that orc had a map of Eregion. Now, and again, here's another thing that really bothers me with this show is the geography doesn't seem to matter, whatsoever, with, all the fast traveling, but, how far has Arondir traveled from Pelargir, or around that area is when we last saw him, to where he's at now, where 3 orcs are, I'm assuming, trying to reach Adar and the main orcish army, which I'll get to that later. So, were these 3 orcs just random stragglers? Did, their alarm not go off? And they're oh, shit, that's right, we were supposed to meet the army in Eregion. But, honestly, I think it's just this show, the writers are being just terrible and just writing all these contrivances where, again, all the conveniences possible to get the characters where they need to be. But anyways, that's really all there is to that scene. We just see Arondir do elf ninja stuff. He conveniently finds the map on that dead orc, and instinctively is Eregion, that's where I gotta go. Which I guess, to be fair, yeah, if an orc did have a map of really any, elvish, dwarvish, human settlement, but that probably is a fair assumption, so I'll give him that. I just don't remember what his purpose is after he left Isildur and the rest of those people. So yeah, I cannot for the life of me. I don't remember if he said where he was going, or if they were just kind of oh well, there's a big battle taking place in Eregion with elves. We should probably have one of the coolest elf characters in this show take part. So I don't know. It could have easily just been them, again, writing a contrived moment to get Arondir at the Battle of Eregion. But anywho, moving on. So Celebrimbor forgets the name of one of his own smiths. And I guess their whole rationale for this scene is Celebrimbor is so fixated and focused on his work that we don't actually see him do anything. That's one thing that's been driving me crazy about this show. So Celebrimbor, if I haven't already stated in one of the previous videos, he's the greatest smith and craftsman in all of Middle-earth, and supposedly, in the actual canon, he's the greatest craftsman since his grandfather Feanor, who crafted the Silmarils. So, one would think a man of that or elf of that reputation in the canon, and what the show has made him out to be, yet we have not seen the man craft a single thing in this entire show. Not once. Not once have we seen the greatest smith / craftsman craft or forge anything. It's so stupid. But anyways, I guess the whole rationale is he's so fixated on, the ring craft that he's forgotten, his other smiths' names. And I get what they were trying to do, but I think they could have done, because overall, I think you can definitely tell that Celebrimbor is very exasperated and just kind of mentally, he's gradually being worn down because of all the stress and stuff like that. And I just feel like they could have done a better job executing that scene, other than him forgetting the name of an elf who presumably he's been working with for hundreds of years at the bare minimum. And again, she's also presumably a member of the Gwaithir Myrdain, who are basically a guild of craftsmen and smiths in Eregion. But whatever. And again, to me, it just makes it makes Celebrimbor just seem more like a senile old man than someone who's just hyper fixated on his work. But one thing that I will kind of give them credit for is Celebrimbor in his dedication to the ringcraft, even though, again, he's not done a damn thing. It's been Sauron the entire time, which kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it would have been nice to see Celebrimbor actually forging the rings, or crafting anything. But again, that is very much in line with him in the canon, is, he's a master craftsman. He's trying to rival his grandfather, Feanor, who crafted the Silmarils. He's trying to match something of that level. And again, that's kind of his own hubris, is how Sauron was able to manipulate his Anatar in the canon and in the show, which I do think, I'll touch more on that later. And again, kind of the next scene is, Celebrimbor looks like he's losing his marbles and becoming very stubborn. And again, I feel like they were going a little too hard with this scene and him being so focused. Again, it's one of those things where, I get what they were trying to do, I just think the execution was not great. And then, of course, Sauron as Anatar continues to be the great deceiver, and again, one thing that I will give credit, and I think I mentioned it before in one of the last episode's reviews, is this version of Sauron as Anatar I've actually really enjoyed, because this is what Sauron should have been. This is how he should have been introduced in Season 1 instead of Halbrand. I really don't understand why that was they went with that angle, when I just think they should have just started with Anatar and not even reveal the Sauron until, say, this second season. So that way, obviously, book readers, we would know that Sauron, Anatar is Sauron, but people who aren't as familiar with the books, or, don't bother to, read articles and stuff like that on, fan speculations, or, do any kind of research and stuff like that, which is totally fine. Obviously, it would have been an impactful reveal, say, if they revealed that in Season 2, where, Anatar is Sauron the whole time. They would have been that probably would have been a pretty big moment for the non-book readers and just people who don't, again, not in the know. But digressing. So that's one of the few things that I have liked, and probably one of the few redeeming qualities about this season is seeing this version of this version of Sauron. And I think the actor Charlie Vickers has been doing a much better job as Anatar than he was as Halbrand. Because I feel like Halbrand, they're trying to make him too much like Aragorn, and not kind of make him... Again, if they were going to make up this character for Sauron to kind of first infiltrate our main characters as, I feel like they should have done a better job of making him seem a little bit different from Aragorn. But anyways, side tangent aside. Okay, so then we flip to Adar and Galadriel and their proposed alliance. And Adar comments about Morgoth's crown and the power behind it. So, in the canon, as far as I'm aware, Morgoth's crown, or really anything that he wore, it didn't have any magical, elements to them. It was just... he wore a crown, he wore armor, or whatever he wore was just regular articles of clothing, regular, again, armor, regular weapons, and all that stuff. Except for maybe Gron, the mace that he wielded. I don't recall if that was magical or not. But, again, he was basically a god. He was a member of the Valar, so basically a godlike being is what the Valar are, so... I don't know. And then, of course, Adar's proposing, if I use the power of Morgoth's crown and then the 3 Elvish rings, we can finally defeat Sauron. How? Also, how does Adar even know that the Elvish rings were forged and that they have them? Another thing that drives me crazy about this show is it's like there's all this stuff going on in the background that they don't actually reveal. Like this is important stuff that they should be showing us, but instead they're just telling us, and the show does so much telling and not enough showing, and especially in key parts like this, like all this fast travel or all these characters gathering information that we don't actually see. This happens presumably off screen because the writers are not very good and very lazy, and so they're just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, this happened off screen, don't worry about it. And so it's really frustrating. But yeah, I don't know what the logic is behind. So again, we'll just say that for argument's sake, Morgoth's crown does have some kind of power. And of course, obviously, the rings, the three Elvish rings, do have power. But I don't understand the logic of how combining them will defeat Sauron. But also, here's another thing too with Sauron is he's a Maiar, so technically he can't die. Even when the One Ring was destroyed, he didn't die. It's just that since he had poured so much of his essence into the ring once it was destroyed, Sauron couldn't take physical shape again, and also his spirit couldn't directly interact with the physical world anymore because he was left in such a weakened state. And so that's the whole thing. Is like, okay, so again, for argument's sake, we'll say that somehow, yeah, combining Morgoth's crown, which is magic now, and 3 Elvish rings can somehow defeat Sauron. So again, you can defeat him, but unless pretty much up until the point Sauron forges the One Ring and pours so much of his essence, he can kind of just keep re-embodying himself. Because even after his body was destroyed in the collapse of Numenor, he still was able to re-embody himself. He just couldn't take a fair form anymore. So again, Adar should know this because presumably, again, there's no concept of time in the show, but presumably he served Sauron for a good chunk of time. So he would probably know that Sauron was a Maiar, and therefore he can't really, again, he technically cannot die. Oh man. But anyways, moving on. And then I thought it was funny that Adar figured out that Sauron was, or Halbrand was Sauron way quicker than anybody else. Like, Sauron deceived everyone from the get-go, yet Adar, within, like, a few minutes was like, oh yeah, Halbrand was Sauron. So dumb. Or shows how dumb literally all the other characters are. And again, characters who should not have been deceived by Sauron, like Galadriel, like Gil-galad, like Elrond, or even when he took the form of Anatar in the books. They didn't know he was Sauron. But they definitely knew something was off and didn't allow him to enter the Grey Havens or Lindon or any of the Elvish settlements in the west. And that's why he went to Celebrimbor. Because Celebrimbor, again, he fed off of his ambition and all that jazz. So then we flip to Numenor, and Elendil is on trial, and so one thing that I don't think I've mentioned before is, so the actor who plays Elendil, Lloyd Owen, I think is way too good for this show. He's one of the, and again, overall I think the cast is good, they just don't have a lot to work with, and so it makes them seem like lesser actors than what they are. However, I think Lloyd Owen is one of those actors in this show so far in the first 2 seasons, where even though he hasn't been given a whole lot, he's still able to elevate his dialogue and his scenes. And I don't know, I just wanted to show my appreciation, because I do think this character is really, I think fits Elendil really well. Like, he has this kind of regal noble quality about the way he portrays his acting as Elendil. So, yeah, again, there are definitely some good qualities in this show, and I do like to try and acknowledge those good qualities, as few and far between as unfortunately as they are, but yeah, definitely wanted to just show my appreciation for the actor. And so then, cliffhanger to that whole scene is apparently a ritual by sacrifice, and I'll get into that later, but I don't know, that was just what I put in my notes, is ritual sacrifice, what? Question mark? Okay, so then, to Rune, everyone's favorite subplot, the stranger, studying with old Tom Bombadil, And he's talking about how, or Tom Bombadil's talking about how Discount Gandalf has failed his test, or Discount Gandalf is talking about how he failed his test. I don't remember. It's so freaking old. But here's the thing. So yes, of course he failed his test because, one, Gandalf should not be in Middle Earth at this point. As I've stressed numerous times, he's about, I don't know, 4,000 years too early. And also, again, the whole... What this show is portraying defeats the purpose of the Astari, or the wizards. They were supposed to be subtle about the way they work, even though they're incredibly powerful, because much like Sauron, they're Maiar. They're basically angelic beings. But they're not supposed to flaunt their power yet. Here's the Stranger, an amnesiac, which also defeats the purpose if you send this man by meteor, which is, again, not very discreet, not very subtle. But then he loses his memory, and Eru Luvatar and the other Valar don't bother to give him his memory back, so that way he can fulfill his purpose. But, so again, this is kind of defeating the purpose of sending someone to kind of stand against Sauron and this Dark Wizard, is by having him flaunt his magic because he doesn't know how to use it, having the man arrive by meteor, having him have no memory of anything. So yeah, of course he's going to fail his test. It's stupid. And then another thing that I didn't address when Tom Bombadil was first introduced. So when he mentions that he goes by Tom Bombadil, or he's known as Tom Bombadil, he actually at this point wouldn't be known as Tom Bombadil, because it's the hobbits. They're the ones who kind of know him as Tom Bombadil. But he has other names with like the dwarves and the elves. And so, and again, I get why he's referred to as Tom Bombadil for the sake of simplicity. But again, another thing too that, again, can't stress enough, Tom Bombadil shouldn't be in Rune, and also, this is not Tom Bombadil. But I don't know. There's a note that I wanted to remind myself that I did not bring up in the episode when he was first introduced. That yeah, he shouldn't be known as Tom Bombadil. But anyways. Oh, and then with the Harfoots, I just put, don't care about the Harfoots / stores. Although one thing that was interesting is, so the main store leader chick, I forget her name, in her title, is talking to Nori, and she mentions the word smiles. Like, so that's actually what the Hobbit holes are referred to as, is smiles, spelled Smiials. So that's the name of their Hobbit holes, is smiles. So that was something I thought was interesting. Something that's actually lore accurate, because it seems like they're implying that the stores are the ones who kind of pioneered the smiles before, the Hobbits originally, or all three branches of the Hobbits originally migrate westward into what we know as the Shire. But overall, could not care less about that subplot, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the audience is in agreement. I don't know anyone who likes the Harfoot subplot. It is pointless. It goes nowhere. But anyways. So we got Discount Gandalf on a staff quest, which is pointless because, again, I think I mentioned this in one of the previous reviews. It seems like they're implying that the wizards get their power from their staffs, which is not true. Because, again, they are angelic beings. They're Maiars. They're already innately magic. Because, again, they're these angelic beings. So now you could maybe make the argument that, like, the staffs might help them focus their magic, like in a lot of other, like in D&D, where you have like a arcane focus, and probably those other works of fiction, fantasy fiction as well, where magic users have to have some kind of, again, an equivalent, like a wand or a staff or something to help harness their power, direct it. But they're making it seem as though, like, that's the source of all wizards' powers. They have to have a staff, which is not true. And I just think, again, it's making this whole already pointless subplot all the more pointless. And then, Discount Gandalf is kind of, doubting himself, and Tom Bombadil literally steals a line from Gandalf. And again, I get what they're trying to do here. They're trying to be like, oh, see, this is how Gandalf gets that saying of, like, well, who who do you choose, who lives and dies, and all that stuff that he tells Frodo. And I hate this so much when the show does this, where they rip directly off of, in particular, the movies, but also they take lines from the books, but they kind of repurpose them to make it seem like, again, they're giving origins to stuff that doesn't need origins. It's so stupid. Please let the Harfoot die. Because again, Tom Bombadil is just kind of like, well, hey, you gotta follow your destiny, young Padawan, because now it's almost like a Jedi type thing at this point. It's like, you can either follow your destiny or let the Harfoots die. Please let the Harfoots die. No one cares about the Harfoots. Let them die. No one cares. They won't die, unfortunately, though. Then we flip back to Khazad-dûm, because Sauron had to go to Khazad-dûm to get more Mithril, and I don't know why he's needing Mithril for the 9. Because if I recall correctly, the only rings were rings of power that involved Mithril were the Elvish rings. And I think that was only one of them that used Mithril. Could be wrong if maybe it was all 3, like in the actual canon. But for whatever reason, again, the show likes to use Mithril for just this, whatever the plot needs it to be, that's what Mithril is. And so, of course, that's where Sauron's there. King Doran refuses Sauron, only to then reveal he refused him, so that way he can essentially become an arms dealer in Middle-earth. Which, I'll give him that. That's smart. So, good for you, King Durin. And then I guess, the ring gives super strength, because he just, throws Durin the Fourth, I don't know, 6 feet away, because, Durin the Younger is clearly realizing that the Rings of Power are bad, but, again, yes, the Rings of Power are a corruptive force, and they're bad, except for the Elvish ones, but they are just really hamming it up on, the effects that these rings have in this show. So, yeah, just really dumb. So then Disa makes a plan to restore Khazad-dûm, because of course she is. She's the one behind all the good things in Khazad-dûm. That's another thing too. Is in the first season, the Dwarvish subplot, even though the logic behind that subplot was really dumb, and I hated it because, again, they gave him an origin to Mithril, which was unnecessary. But Durin and Disa were the two characters that I genuinely liked anytime that they were on screen. I wasn't just rolling my eyes and sighing. But then this season, I don't know. I don't like these two characters and their dynamic as much. Because I feel like it's more Disa just kind of instructing Durin on what to do, and he's just kind of following her, or following her lead outside of Durin. Again, one of the, I guess, few decent scenes is, when Durin's trying to convince his father, it's like, look, the ring is evil, please take it off from me. But overall, I've just not been as big a fan of, the two of them and their dynamic in this season. Because I feel like a lot of it's been more of, them squabbling rather than their endearing affection for each other, which was part of their charm in the first season. So we get to Arianne sad that, her dad's about to get sacrificed, even though she's kind of partially responsible. But again, so she doesn't exist in the canon, and I feel like they just invented this character for the sole fact of, again, manufacturing drama, because that's what this show is really good at, is coming up with random scenarios for manufactured drama, not genuine drama because of good writing, where you can write scenes that feel very dramatic, very, very tense. But instead, no, just littered with so much manufactured drama, it's ridiculous. So then Muriel asking Elendil to bow, which seems out of place for her character. I get why she wants him to live, because, it's Elendil, he is the beacon of hope for the faithful, but I still feel like that's a little out of character for Muriel, based on what we've seen of her so far in this show. So then we go back to Khazad-dûm and Disa summons bats. What the hell? Such a stupid scene. And then flip back to Numenor, and This is such a weird editing choice. Like, I feel like they should have just stuck with the Numenor, rather than Numenor, that quick scene of Disa preventing the miners from delving deeper by summoning bats with her singing voice. They should have just stuck with Numenor. But anyways, so Miriel asks, or volunteers to be sacrificed instead of Elendil because she, states that like he caused the uprising because of me in my name, so therefore I'll replace him. And that seems to track with the weird Numenorian laws. And so Farazan and the rest of the Numenorians are like, okay, that's cool. So she takes a dip in the pool, and the sea worm, which I think, I don't recall exactly if I think sea worms are mentioned in Tolkien's lore, but I think that's literally all it is like a mention. I don't think there's any confirmation that they are a real being, or if it's just like one of those kind of in-world folktale type deals. But anywho, so apparently that's like a Numenorian tradition. It's not in the canon. I don't know where this came from, other than, again, just manufactured drama for this show. So of course the sea worm shows up and doesn't eat her, so then she's deemed innocent, and then she's queen again, because Numenor laws are dumb and don't make sense. It's literally all just like, hey, what do we need the plot to do? She needs to be innocent now, so now she's queen, even though only a couple episodes later, Farazan was declared king because the eagle showed up, which also, again, here's another thing too, that I didn't mention that episode, whatever episode that was. Eagles can talk. The eagles, they are a sentient race, just like, the elves, dwarves, and humans. So I don't know why that eagle didn't just be like, correct him and be like, hey, no, you all chanting Farazan? No, I'm not here for him. So stupid. Then Farazan looks into the Palantir. Sure, why not? That tracks. He's a schemer. He's desperate for power, so he's looking into the Palantir to see if he finds anything useful. Why not? So then we get to the legions of orcs, because apparently he didn't just bring a legion; he brought looks like all of Mordor. And my question was, with the last episode, is how did that entire army, or that legion, arrive in Eregion without being detected by anyone? From Mordor, all the way from Mordor to Eregion. That's probably a good 400 to 600 miles, give or take. And no one, not a soul, detected this army, or that first legion. Then even more people just happened to not notice an entire army of orcs and trolls with siege weapons marching from Mordor all the way to Eregion. So stupid. So we get Celebrimbor finally standing up to Sauron, because Sauron's just kind of like, hey man, don't worry, just hang out here, keep working on those rings. I got stuff here. I'll run the day-to-day affairs, and Celebrimbor shoves them. So good. Celebrimbor finally needs to step it up. And then here's the next scene where Celebrimbor walks outside and sees a bright sunny day, and all the citizens are cheerful and happy and merry-go-lucky, all that jazz. Obviously, this is an illusion that Sauron has cast. Now, so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Sauron to cast illusions, but I'm a little dubious of him being able to cast such an elaborate illusion to where Celebrimbor not only, it'd be one thing for Celebrimbor to see, the bright sunny day and the people of Osanethil just, again, leisurely walking around having a nice time, whereas in reality, it's nighttime, and there's a siege about to happen, so all the people are panicking, they're rushing, and, the people or the soldiers are getting ready to prepare for battle. So I don't know if it's within, I think it's maybe a bit of a stretch that Sauron could produce such a grand illusion to where not only visually, but also the entire surroundings around Celebrimbor and Sauron, that he'd be completely unaware of everything else. again, like the scene probably would not bother me as much if the show was better written, because that's the thing is like there are scenes that I will admit in this show, both seasons, where I'm a little more nitpicky on. Because typically, if a show or movie is well written, I can kind of overlook like the little nitpicks like that, and they don't bother me as much. But when something is so poorly written, like Rings of Power, it just keeps. It's a snowball effect of like everything. I catch everything, and it bothers me. But anywho, so again, Mithril was only involved in the Elvish rings because Sauron's just kind of like, oh well, I've managed to get Mithril from King Durin. I don't know how I got that Mithril. Again, it's another one of those things that happened off screen where I guess he deceived someone, whether it was King Durin or just some random dwarf where he's like, hey pal, here's some gold, give me some Mithril, or just completely deceived him like Sauron would. Again, could have been cool to have seen that scene happen instead of Sauron just showing up with like a jar of Mithril and be like, here you go, pal, let's go forge some rings. But again, to my knowledge and my recollection, the 9 rings of men did not have Mithril involved. The 7 dwarvish rings did not have Mithril involved. It was only the elvish rings. And again, I'm pretty sure it was only one of the 3 elvish rings had Mithril involved in its forging. Ugh. So we go to Sauron keeps deceiving Celebrimbor, and as the Orcish army of Adar is just across the river, the people are panicking. I do actually like this scene where Sauron's kind of surveying the battle, what's going to become the battlefield in the Second of Eregion, and kind of does this composer pose, which I think is actually kind of cool because again, he is essentially composing or orchestrating this whole mess. Again, deceiving Celebrimbor and the Elves of Eregion, bringing Adar and his Orcish host to Eregion. Another thing that would have been nice to have seen more of how he deceived Adar into bringing the Orcish host there, because that seems to be Galadriel's impression, and she's trying to convince Adar that Adar should not fight the elves, but where she got, I don't know, just so many assumptions based on like just complete leaps of logic. But again, cool scene where again we see Sauron sitting on the ramparts of Osten Ethel, doing the composer pose, which is fitting because again he has orchestrated all of this. So I do think that was cool. And again, Bear McCreary's score is one of the solid things about this entire series. Is the soundtrack of Rings of Power, both seasons so far, have been solid. And then Adar begins the Siege of Eregion, and I'm assuming the next 2 episodes will be mostly action-packed, which I guess will kind of be a nice change of pace because really not a whole lot has happened this entire season. Not a whole lot really even happened last season. So maybe that'll be nice to have, again, a nice change of pace where stuff is happening. But that pretty much wraps up my review of episode 6. It's one of the least terrible ones. Maybe not quite as... I don't know. Yeah, I'd say maybe a little bit on par with episode 5, purely in the sense that, like, it's not as horrendous or quite as offensive to the lore. Obviously, there's some stuff that, like, again, the whole Númenórean, like, sacrifice thing, that may, again, that's another one of those things that maybe it wouldn't have bothered me as much had this show been written better. But overall, this show, or this episode, wasn't as terrible. And I think, to me, goes to show that had they focused on Sauron and Celebrimbor's relationship a lot more throughout both seasons, because that's one of the highlights of this season so far, is Annatar and Celebrimbor and their dynamic. So I think had they focused more on that, and a bit more on like the Númenórean splinter between the faithful and the Kingsmen, instead of just everything feeling so rushed. But yeah, so that wraps up this review. Again, not a horrendous episode. Not good either, but it's not horrendous or offensively bad. So by Rings of Power standards, that's actually pretty good. But leave your thoughts below. What do you think of this episode? Or have you even bothered to keep up with the season so far? Because I know some people have dipped out after like episode 1, and I don't blame them. So, yeah, give me your thoughts below. Do usual YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. And until next, everyone, cheers.